Jedi.
Do you think she's going to say that?
I don't know.
You think she's going to be like, I'm no Jedi?
Part of me feels like the line was so iconic when she said it in Rebels, because like she's saying it to Vader, but I don't. I think she's
Spoiler.
officially a Jedi now. I think she's a Jedi now.
She's taken on, some Padawans. We'll get into that. In this episode.
Yeah,
Episode 3, man, already.
Did you notice? I don't know if I was just early, but when I signed into Disney Plus, episode 3 didn't have a title on the thumbnail yet.
Yes, I did notice that because I meant to write it down, and I had to, like, in the show it said "Time to Fly."
Yeah,
and so I was like, oh, and I went back in my notes and wrote that down because I had noticed that too. I was like,
Yeah, when I saw it said episode 3, I was like, wait, is this about episode 3? I was like, oh my god.
Hold everything.
Anakin alert. What overall, what'd you think of the episode? Did you like it? Was it better than the first two?
Yeah. It was good. It's hard to say. It's hard to say if I liked it more than the other ones because there's a lot of things I liked about it. I love Star Wars dogfights, so there's a lot of that in this episode, which made me like it a lot.
Yeah.
I guess what I can say is I didn't have any complaints this episode. So yes, I'd say overall that means I liked it, right?
And again, for a refresher at people at home, this is kind of unique because I'm midway through Rebels and you haven't seen any Rebels. So this is an episode that I'm like, if you've never seen Rebels before, I think that there's a lot that happens in this episode where you're like, oh shoot, like what the hell's going on?
I figured there was some comments that were made where it was like, getting that later in the episode. There's some comments about, the last time we saw Ezra, and I'm like, oh, but yeah. So it's interesting. It's very, sorry, go ahead.
No, you can take that one.
I was going to say it's interesting coming from somebody who hasn't seen Rebels at all. Again, it just leads back to the whole, whoever said you don't have to have seen Rebels to get this, like, lies. I mean, I guess if you're talking like specific wording, like to understand, okay, but I just feel like the meaning behind what's going on in this show, I feel like would be so much more impactful if I had seen Rebels. So I'm kind of bummed that that's kind of taken away from me, because I'm assuming, much like what Obi-Wan the series did for Revenge of the Sith and kind of tying that in, like if you had never seen the first 3 movies or seen that and watched Obi-Wan, you're like, yeah, this is a really cool fight scene, but the impact of the conversation that's had between the two characters is something you absolutely would be missing. And I'm scared that I'm just not gonna, there's gonna be some deep conversation between two people and I'm gonna be like, that was boring, or say something lame, because I get it.
When we hung up last week and we weren't filming anymore, I was like, I really hope that I remembered it correctly, that I read an article that someone said you didn't have to watch Rebels, and that's not something that I just made up in my head.
Did you make it up?
No, I'm about 90% sure. I haven't looked for the article since then, but I'm about 90% sure I saw an article that said that.
You know what? I'm going to start looking that up right now because I'm a little
Well, while you're doing that, that's a perfect segue for me to kind of get into one of the things that I picked up. So, Ahsoka is in the New Republic era, which is along with like all the Mando stuff and everything we've kind of seen with like Boba. And Mando was very much a Western, like in the sense that, you feel like Din Djarin's like a sheriff showing up to town and kind of just blowing up the galaxy. Ahsoka to me is very samurai, like ancient Japanese, like especially this episode, I felt very much like I was watching like an old school karate movie with like, especially we can jump straight into it with Sabine training in the beginning, and they did this whole like see me without seeing me, like she told Sabine she has to wear a mask, and Ahsoka was like dancing around her in a way, and like she had to like dodge the attacks. And then like during the intro to the show, the music is literally just like rain sticks and like just sticks hitting each other, like again getting into that whole like samurai vibe. And I'm just like, I'm getting a very, very, very like heavy Japanese influence into this show, which I don't know if that's intentional, but it's just what I'm taking.
maybe because Hu Yang was saying like he was like giving commands to Sabine when like he was kind of training her, and I'm not sure what he said. I didn't write it down, but it sounded very, possibly Japanese, like you said, samurai like. Um, yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I thought it was cool that they kind of brought back the blind visor
Mm-hmm.
because I'm trying to remember if we've seen it since A New Hope. Like, have we seen that ever used?
Ray did. You blocked
Oh,
that
that's
out.
right.
You blocked
That's
it
right.
out. Yeah, hey, on that topic, you know
Possibly.
what bothers me? So we post that video on TikTok, and it's kind of gone like very out of control. It's like about to hit 100,000 views, and it's
I
talking about
know, it's
Ahsoka
crazy.
resetting episode 7, 8, and 9. And there are so many comments in that video of people being like, "Oh God, just another group of sequel haters." And I'm like, out of everybody in the internet, I'm the dude that likes the
Right.
sequels. Like,
It's very interesting though for any of you that did comment on our TikTok. I loved going through and reading the comments and seeing the different opinions that people have. It just
mhm,
shows you how impactful this series can be. Star Wars can affect everybody. And so reading comments, some people are like, "Oh, that'd be so cool. Oh, I didn't even think about that." And some people are like, "Oh yeah, so and so, like other people have talked about this too." Or some people are like you said, like, "Oh man, they just hate the sequel." Oh geez. But it's like everybody's got their own opinion. And
mhm.
I guess it's kind of like one of those things like, what does Star Wars mean to you? There are some people that have just given up entirely on Star Wars and don't even watch these shows, which is a shame because they're awesome. Like
Yeah.
I was concerned. I know we kind of talked a little bit on the Scruffy Nerf Herder podcast if it was too much saturation of Star Wars, but I haven't seen Rebels, and I am really actually enjoying this show so far. So
That's good. That's
yeah,
good. Did you find the article?
I did,
Okay,
and
so I didn't
it.
make it up.
Well, hold on. I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't find that one. The only one I saw that said, in short, Rebels is essential to
Oh
understand Ahsoka.
dear God. Okay,
So
I
it's
might
like
have to
quite
see
the
if I can find
opposite.
it. I'll have to see if I can find it on my end because it was like a Disney exec saying something along the lines of like, "You don't have to watch Rebels to enjoy Ahsoka," which
That's kind of what this is saying. It's like you'll get it, but it'll probably be uninspired, which is like kind of like what I was saying. Like, you might see it and then be like I said, I'm concerned I'm going to miss a very important moment. And I guess I
Mhm.
kind of did in this episode too. We'll get to that later, but it had to do with those space whales. I mean,
Yeah.
that was something that they even made a comment like, "Oh, I haven't seen those since the last time we saw Ezra." And I was like, "Oh, they aren't just some cool whale that I saw in space that I thought was awesome." Like, I
Yeah,
put Demogorgon space whale is what I put
yeah.
because they look like
Yeah,
them.
this show had so many for me so many cool moments like and I guess like the thing like really getting into that like Ahsoka Jedi training, that scene I felt like was so well done where they just literally were playing cat and mouse and Sabine was blinded and Ahsoka was like tapping her on the shoulder and Sabine was like clearly just going full Mandalorian and not trusting in the Force like a Jedi. And then I always got a kick out of the fact that like Hu Yang is just talking shit the whole time. And he's just like
Yeah, he was.
he's like, "You're not gonna be a Jedi. You suck. Just kill yourself." Like I'm just like, dang it, man. Like
See, he was without ceiling. He was roofless, and he just straight up told her like, "You are the worst Padawan I've seen, and I've seen a lot." And then even like Ahsoka's like, "You told her that?" And he's like, "Yeah, what? I was being honest. Like, what do you what do you want me to do? I'm a robot." Like, what I thought was super impressive though with the whole little cat and mouse thing was it was such a tense scene with her having to use the Force to sense where Ahsoka was. And I don't know if you caught it, but you could hear Sabine's feet shuffling. You could hear her feet shuffling and how silent Ahsoka's
Mhm,
footsteps were. You couldn't hear them at all. And she was walking around. Any movement Ahsoka made, not a sound.
mhm.
But then you'd hear Sabine like shuffling, and like even when she was like just slowly turning, you would hear her feet shuffling. And I was like, dang, that's good. That just shows like somebody who's clearly trained versus somebody who's not as trained.
Yeah, and on top of that, they did something really cool in the editing. I was listening to it in my hotel room with my headphones on, and when Ahsoka was talking, she would go from your right ear to your left ear.
They did
and it
the
was
spatial
like
audio.
they did. I was like, that's
Oh,
awesome. I was like, that's such an effect that if you're not watching on surround sound or you're just watching it on normal speakers, you're not going to pick it up. But hey, Dave Filoni, Lucasfilms, I picked it up and I appreciate you because that
that's
was awesome.
awesome.
Yeah.
I see. I watched it on my TV, and like I don't have my stereo system like set up, so I just had to use like the TV speakers. So I didn't catch that, but I would have loved to hear that. That's cool because that really brings you like into the moment or into the scene. So
Mm-hmm.
dang, that's cool. I'm so
Yeah.
excited about that. I don't even hear it. I'm just like,
Yeah, it's just like a little detail that is like you didn't have to do
Yeah,
it, but it's
yeah,
awesome. So
that's so cool.
one thing that kind of threw me off was like so we like are clearly in the New Republic era, and like I would say if you haven't read books, like I haven't read them, and I'm not really like into like the comics. I feel like it's such an era of like confusion. Like you don't know who's really in charge. You don't know where Leia is. You don't know where Luke is in this whole entire time period. But they did bring back Mothma, and she's got a big role in all the Star Wars movies, along with Andor. And it's kind of cool to see that she is now the new Chancellor, which kind of shocked me. I thought it was going to be Leia.
I need to see Andor. I still haven't seen it.
Yeah, Andor is the one that I'm really excited to jump in with you. We're gonna have to have that conversation maybe on the next Scruffy podcast. That after Ahsoka, where do we go next? Because there's a lot of different routes that we could take, but we'll figure it out.
Not enough time in the world, you know.
Not enough time, and there's too much Star Wars.
So, speaking of that scene, there was a couple things that I noted, and one was we've seen, and I want to say it was Obi-Wan where we saw the Imperialists. Was that Obi-Wan, right? Where we kind of like saw how they were like going from being Imperialists to like now switching over to this New Republic, and but like still getting jobs and stuff.
Yes,
that was Obi-Wan, right?
No, that might have been Mando.
Was it Mando? See, I couldn't remember.
That was the last season of Mando, where they had that super hot, suspicious Imperial spy that tricked the other guy.
Because then Moff Gideon came back. That's right. Okay, so it was Mandalorian. So yeah, thank you. Basically, even with this show, it seems like we have all these new, like, or I guess not new. We have all these imperialists that used to be for the Empire, now working for the New Republic. And, you know, they even made comments like, oh, they've sworn oaths and stuff like that. And Hera was like, well, shouting out for the Empire doesn't sound like, you know, they're really standing by those oaths. But do you think, because I feel like we've seen just so many examples of people not truly switching from the Empire to the New Republic, do you think that they even are switching, or do you think they've just always had that loyalty to the Empire, or do you think it's like a mix?
I think they've always had that loyalty, in my opinion. Like, there's a really good scene in the sequels where I think it's like Finn. Is her name Rose? Is that the character he's with? Anyway, Finn is there and he's like at a casino and he's like, oh, all of these rich people made profits. And they're like, oh, they're selling to the Empire. And he's like, oh, no. They don't just sell to the Empire. They sell to whoever has the money. Like they're supporting the war. The war is never going to end because these guys are making money. And I think that's kind of where it is like when you have the Senate and all these people in Coruscant that are running the galaxy, I'm like, I think you're just like, I want to stay in power. So whoever I have to report to, I'm going to report to. Like, this is just who my new boss is. And I think that's kind of what I took it as.
And then Hera kind of said something about that too. She was speaking to the guy Xiono.
Oh, who is 100% a villain.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, did the Empire somehow like infiltrate the freaking New Republic already? Because that guy was just super sus, and I don't know. I just every vibe I got from him, I was like, and he's a bad guy. We're gonna see him trade or turn or do something. But just the way he was talking, I was like, he's a bad guy. But
he is the imposter. We found him.
She made a comment. She's like, were you a part of the war? He's like, no. And then she's like, She's like, you just waited to see whose side to join. Like, that kind of plays along exactly what you were saying. So
it was such a badass line too, because it's when you see everything that she goes through in Rebels, and then like she's like, oh, did you fight in the war? And it reminded me of that line in Hamilton where he's like, while we were off in the trenches, you were off getting high with the French. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's such a great line of like, who is really responsible? Is it for like the delegations, or is it really the people that were fighting on the front line that caused them to surrender? Like,
Yeah.
it's so dope. But with this, and we're seeing members of the New Republic, and we're seeing the senators and chancellors. Do you think we're going to see Leia?
Ooh, I don't think so.
Mm.
She might be mentioned. Somebody might say something like, Senator Organa or something like that, but I don't think we're actually going to see her.
Yeah, I guess
Um,
technically, like, what does it really add? Like,
yeah, it
doesn't
really
really
wouldn't.
add much.
Maybe just like a quick cameo, or maybe like the back of her head or something. But I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I don't know.
One thing
The
that
other
I wanted.
thing, yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No. I insist.
No, I awkward silence. We're just gonna stay here. No, the one part that I don't know if it's because I haven't gotten that far into Rebels, and clearly like this was a spoiler for me, but Hera has a kid, and I know she's romantically involved with Kanan, and I was just like, well, there goes
Oh,
the fourth season of Rebels for me, because like if she gets pregnant there, now I know that their kid's there. But I did think it was
wow.
interesting because like I never really thought about like alien species mingling and having kids. I was just like, oh yeah, like your kid would kind of be a mixture of you and I don't know, like I guess
Oh,
like the human race. It's just interesting.
yeah, that is interesting. I thought you were going to say something different when you started talking about Hera, because I've seen a lot of comments this week
Oh, about
on
how thick.
how thick.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, I didn't even know, I didn't even catch it. But then this episode, I was like, dang, what's up, girl?
Yeah, the internet has
Um,
been very, very into Hera and the girl from Scott Pilgrim.
mm,
She has grown up.
I just thought that's why I thought you were going with it. You're like, she has a kid.
She has a badonkadonk, and we're gonna spend the rest of this episode just talking about
That's all we're talking.
that.
Yeah. One little thing that kind of like you said with the spatial audio, with hearing her, and this is such like a super nerdy thing that I noticed during that conversation, is she had two people with her. And one of them was, I believe it's called the Mon Calamari.
Okay.
That's kind of like the same race of like the it's a trap guy,
Okay.
Admiral Akbar. The orange guy on the left behind her, his eyes were moving. And I feel like every time I've seen those characters, their eyes are just kind of still and they just kind of look around. But his eyes not only were blinking, but you could see him kind of subtly moving as they were having a conversation. And I was like, man, and like I was really trying hard to see if it was CGI or if it was like a costume. And I
Mm-hmm.
could not tell. And I was just like, that's good. Like that's good. Like, and again,
Yeah.
it's just one of those subtle things. It's like you could have just had his eyes just be isolated and not move. You could maybe add blinking, but his eyes literally, I could see him look around a little bit, like from left to right and side to side. And I was like, dang, like what a subtle detail, but it just looks so cool.
Yeah, that's one thing that I definitely have to compliment them for this show is like the mixture between like practical and like CGI, because there's things that I assumed was CGI and then like I'll see like later in the week they're like, no, that was real. Like
Mm.
the Loth cat that Sabine had, that was
Mm-hmm.
an actual puppet. I was like, I
No
thought that was
way.
CGI. I thought it was 100% CGI, but it was a puppet. And
Yeah,
then
I did too.
Hu Yang, I was like, that has to be CGI. But then,
Yeah.
like, this week, I was like, no, that actually looks like a practical effect. Like, it looks like they
Huh.
built the robot. But, I
Interesting.
mean, obviously, like, when they're doing, like, the fighting scenes with, like, the sabers, that's probably CGI. But, like, when he's in the cockpit with Ahsoka, I was just like, that looks like a practical effect to me. Like, it doesn't look like CGI.
If you can go back and forth though, that just shows how good of a job you're doing. If you could do practical effects
Yeah.
and CGI and it still looks good,
Mm-hmm.
hats off to you. Like that's awesome.
It's also like think about how far we've come with CGI from like the Scorpion King Dwayne Johnson like being terrible to like what we have today.
You know what's frustrating is like I absolutely love the movie Jurassic Park.
Uh huh.
And I felt like even today it holds up. Like I feel like it looks fantastic. And I'm like, there's so many movies that came out after that that just did not look like that. And I think that's why that movie did so well, is because you were like, oh my gosh, that's really a dinosaur.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, yeah, like you said, CGI's come a long way. It's hard to tell now what's like you said, what's a practical effect or what's CGI. So
Yeah. There was a line in the next scene that I had to write down because I was like, "Ooh, that's a great freaking line." And so Ahsoka and Sabine are like talking about the Force and using it, and Ahsoka basically says something along the lines of like, "Oh, the Force is in everyone. Like you can be a Jedi if you really try hard enough." But then the next line was, "Talent is a factor. Training and focus truly define one's success." And I was like, "Whew." I was like, that has so much like power in like everything in life, and I'm like, I love it. It's such a good
put
line.
that on a poster, dude. That's good. I
Yeah,
guess I didn't really catch that, but it's very true. It's
yeah.
very true. No, I thought the conversation after that shortly between Hu Yang and Ahsoka was interesting as well because they're he was saying, oh, or I think maybe Ahsoka said Sabine's not a typical Jedi. That was kind of
Mhm.
the basis of the conversation. But then Hu Yang was like, well, technically neither are you. And he's just like, there's not a lot of what we would call typical Jedis. He's like, you come from a long line of non-typical Jedis. So my question is like, are all the Jedis just gone? Like, we have Luke, who you could say is a pretty powerful Jedi considering I don't know. I'm just trying to like piece
When
it
he said
together
that
because he,
line, did you take that as he was talking about Anakin?
yeah, and I because as soon as he said it, I was really thinking because obviously like from Attack of the Clones and stuff, there's a lot of Jedi, but
Yeah.
it all came from like Jedi training and everything came from and Ahsoka. I mean, kind of came from that as well, even though she kind of came late to the party. So did Anakin, and you really start thinking about the other Jedi that are left. Jedi. I say this because like Rey, like was she a Jedi?
Hmm.
Or was she Sith? Like she had that constant battle in those movies. So it's like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
makes a typical Jedi?
I saw a theory like this is old school theory, but like when Episode 7 first came out, there was a theory that the Jedi Order was dead, the Jedi was over, and the new path was going to be calling yourself a Skywalker. And so like that was the
Hmm.
new thing. So it was like the Sith and the Skywalkers. And that's where like, oh, Rey is now a Skywalker, and it would like justify that. But
Oh,
I definitely could see it. Like I definitely think that like the Jedi's we have today obviously are probably going to learn from the mistakes of the old Jedi Order because they made a lot of them. But like I don't know. I don't know if that just changes what a Jedi is, or if that's like I don't know.
it was
I
such like
do.
a
Oh,
quick
you take it.
statement
Yeah.
that Hu Yang made, and it just made me think so much when he was
Hmm.
like, "There's a there's a long line of non-typical Jedi's," and I'm like, "So what's a typical Jedi then?"
Yeah.
Like,
Well, like my
I don't know.
mind took it to like, okay, he's clearly talking about Anakin, and now that we're discussing here, I'm like, okay, you could clearly say Obi-Wan because Obi-Wan wasn't your typical Jedi, and then you could say like Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn wasn't your typical Jedi. He was
But
pushing
why?
back because he didn't want to be on the council, and he wanted to.
Right?
He pushed back and like didn't
What
pursue
about
that
Obi Wan?
type
I
of.
feel like Obi Wan like truly followed the Jedi way.
Obi-Wan had a lover.
What we talking about? Ventress?
No, no, yeah. There is some sexual tension there, 100%. No, I'm trying to think of her name. She's a Mandalorian, and it was in Clone Wars. It's Bo-Katan's
What?
sister. Um, and Obi-Wan. It's very, 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 very heavily hinted that they were totally doing it on the side.
Hello there.
Yeah, yeah, yes, very much so.
Hello there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and so like
Dang.
that, and then like you look at some of the other stuff that like Obi-Wan has had to change as he got older, and he's no longer like I mean technically a Jedi. And even like in Episode 1, and the only reason I know is I saw this recently. He's like, I was once a Jedi Knight, and it's like he doesn't even consider himself a Jedi Knight even in old age. So it's like,
Anymore. Yeah, okay.
what is he? What is he now?
That's what I'm saying. What's a typical Jedi? Can you say that anything that came after episode 3 is not a typical Jedi? Or like you know what I mean?
you could make the argument that like none of the Jedis we saw are Jedis because they let the Sith come to power.
What's a Jedi? We didn't even know.
Yeah. Let me look that up in Webster's dictionary. What is
That's
the
why
tip?
it made my mind just go down this path that I was just thinking. I know we've spent a lot of time talking on this, but it really, I sat there. It was almost hard for me to continue watching the show because I literally had to pause it and I was like really thinking about what a typical Jedi is. But if you have any
Yeah, no,
ideas in the
it's an
comments,
interesting
let us
topic.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I
Let
mean,
us know what you
it's
think.
definitely a something I didn't pay attention to, but I'm glad we talked about it because it is kind of a very deep topic. Like,
Thought
damn,
provoking.
yeah.
The next scene we have
Sia showed up.
Well, before that, we have
Oh.
Sabine trying to use the Force
Oh, that's true.
on like a mug. And I'm
Try
gonna
is
ask
the
you.
key point.
I'm gonna
She
ask
didn't
you right now,
do. She
Brian.
tried.
I'm gonna ask you right now. Have you or have you not tried to use the Force yourself, like legitimately?
Today,
Like at
I do.
any
I
point
do
in
it
your
on
life?
I do it on an hourly basis, just in case.
You're just
Just
like,
in case.
what do you think the right hand gesture is?
I think
Is
it's
two
very
fingers?
much of just reaching out. I
Whoa,
think
that's like a
that's kinda
Force
what you-
choke, bro. That's
Yeah.
a little dark there. A little
Yeah,
Sith.
and then you got to do the Peter Parker, the
Now we're just crossing
yeah
too
genres.
many. Yeah.
No, dude, I feel like everyone has done that of just tried to use the Force at some point in their life.
We're gonna get somebody commenting and be like, "I didn't, you nerds."
Yeah, I mean, if that's you, you've had a terrible childhood. I mean, what the hell's wrong with you? If I have looked at
absolutely.
so many objects, like being on the couch and being like,
You
"Oh, I wish
stared.
I had the remote," and the remote doesn't
See,
come. You know,
and that's what I love that scene so much because she was just like, okay, forces in all living things. And she just like was sitting there. Like, I just feel like that's been majority of people maybe watching this at some point or another. You've seen something like you said, the remote across the couch, and you're like,
yeah.
you just give it a look, and you're like trying to reach for it.
So there's
Make
a
it
scene in
shake.
Rebels where Ezra's trying to learn the Force, and they tell him to move this crate from one side to another, but Chopper puts on the magnetic floors so he can't lift the crate. And when I was watching this scene, I was like, how funny would it be if like Ahsoka glued the cup to the table so it couldn't move?
Chopper's a menace, dude.
Yeah.
That's what the episode was missing. Chopper.
Yeah, he wasn't in it. Only for like a second with the random kid, Jason. Yeah. From there, we show up to the galaxy. I didn't write down the planet. Did you?
I didn't. Is
No,
it
but anyway,
Corellia? Remember we talked about this last week. We thought it was like,
well, Corellia is the place with the shipyards.
we were like arguing whether it was like Star Fox or not.
Yeah, that is definitely the shipyard place.
Okay, I thought that
this
was
one is like something with an E or something with a D, like Denbra or Denbor or something like that. But again, this planet, I'm jumping ahead, but like the planet with like the red leaves and stuff. Again, just going into like samurai, where I'm just like, dude, there's like so many different like Japanese style like aesthetics here that I'm just like, okay, someone's clearly a fan of like old Japanese movies. But we get to the solar system and we see the giant what is that thing called? It had turbo lasers. Oh, the hyperspace ring.
I literally thought it was another Death Star.
That thought crossed my mind, and I was like, they wouldn't. They definitely wouldn't. But I was just like,
when I saw the shape, I was like, oh no. I was like, are you doing that again? And then immediately I was like, oh, Halo. It's a Halo ring. It's a little scaled down.
Yeah. I would have loved to see the Death Star. Like, just they come over and they're just like, oh, man. Not this again. Hey, while I got you, let me just drive in that little tunnel and blow up the generator while we're here real quick.
We know how to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, they get quickly ambushed, right after that by Sia.
Yep.
Or Shin, as Star Wars likes to call her. And you know what I loved was the freaking Imperial ships and how they look like old like P-40s from like World War II, like old dogfighting style planes that they used to use back then. I thought that was so cool looking. But
that was
hated.
That's new. The first time we've seen that, right?
I believe so, because I've never seen that before, and I was like, these ships are awesome, because like I said, they look like they had the inspiration of like old P-40s. And the one thing I hated about them was the lasers. They sounded like so wussy. They were like pew, 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 pew. Whereas like the TIE fighter ones, like they come in like, and they're normally like I don't know. I feel like they sound cooler. Maybe that didn't come off as cooler, but I just felt like
The
they sounded so like pew pew pew.
Yeah, they definitely had like a different sound where
Mm-hmm.
it didn't really feel Star Wars to me, but the
Didn't feel
ships were
menacing.
cool as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Shin, I saw this theory, definitely off topic, but it was basically along the lines of Balin and Shin, and how Shin's last name is Hati, and Balin's name is, what is his last name? Skull.
Shinhate. Skull. You have a
Skull.
last name of Skull?
Skoll. And
That's pretty
what
dope.
people were saying is that like Balin and Shin, um, that their names. I'm gonna have to look this up. We might talk about this in the next episode, but essentially it's along the lines of like Norse mythology and how you
Okay.
have two of the wolves, a night wolf that carries the moon and a day wolf that carries the sun, and how their names are similar to the wolves in Norse mythology. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, I don't know if you guys planned that, but that's definitely cool. And if
Hmm.
that plays into the story, that's even cooler.
Did you hear
Um,
that guy's voice, Morok? Morok?
I
Is his name?
did. I did.
And he's deep voice as heck.
Yeah, and then at the end of the show, his name popped up in the credits as an actor, and I was like, that's definitely not Ezra. I think we can kind of clear that.
I saw some speculation this week. Some people were trying to say how maybe it's like Starkiller
Mm-hmm.
from the Force Unleashed games.
I wanted to talk to you about that, but I couldn't remember if you played those games or not.
I haven't.
Okay.
I've seen trailers because obviously this is so badass, but I haven't played the games. I really want to.
Yeah, it's that would be cool. I would definitely be into Starkiller, and I saw that the actor who plays him appeared in the credits for last week. But I saw another theory that I was like, okay, that's out there, but hey, let's do it. Where Vader and the Emperor had made a clone of Luke Skywalker at some point, and so you know how his hand gets chopped off at like Bespin. Well,
Okay.
somehow they capture that hand that was floating in space, and they're able to create a clone of Luke Skywalker. And this is like in
What?
the Star Wars Legends books or something like that. And they were like, what if this Inquisitor turns out to be Luke Skywalker's clone? And I was like, you know what? Let's blow up the internet because that's definitely going to piss some people off. Like,
You know what's crazy too is like how much they've talked about cloning. Obviously, I think they were doing it to tie in like the fact of the Emperor, but like coming back in the somehow Palpatine return. But
mhm.
didn't like a guy from, oh my gosh, I keep wanting to say Kashyyyk. Oh my gosh, Camino.
Yeah.
One of the scientists from Camino was in like the Mandalorian series,
Hmm.
and it was like he was part of the cloning facilities. Like they just keep talking about cloning. So what if, man? What if it's Anakin?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Of like, could they clone Anakin and transfer his
That's.
conscious?
Can you imagine that's how he comes back? That's how he's back. Is he's that guy?
Oh my god! What if like Ahsoka and him are fighting, and he takes his helmet off, and it's Anakin? Oh, internet
I
will
am no Jedi,
implode, man.
bro.
Internet
Yeah.
will just
Oh yeah.
blow up.
I feel like all credibility would just go away. How would
Yeah.
you explain that and make things make sense? I don't know. We'll
So
see.
I wrote down a note here, and I clearly wrote it down before the show progressed. But there's a scene where Ahsoka's ship gets damaged from the starfighters, and Ahsoka is like, "Don't worry, I'll distract them," and puts on a spacesuit and stands on the wing and is just like lightsaber fighting the bullets in 0G. And I wrote down most badass scene I've ever seen in my life. But then literally we get an even more badass scene directly after it. But like the Ahsoka scene was so sick. Like she chopped down a spaceship in space as it was coming to her, and then she's running down the wing of a ship, and I'm like, this is what I want from this show. I just want action like this. Like it's so awesome.
I was 50-50. As
Okay.
soon as she said, I'm going out there, I was like, WTF, Ahsoka? What do you mean you're going out there? Can you breathe out there? Like, I don't understand. And then she comes out in this like tailor-made suit for herself, and I was like, oh hell yeah. And I was so excited. And then she
It
gets
had
out
the
there and she's
tentacle
just,
section as well, and it was
yeah,
like,
yeah. She comes out there and she's like, pulls out her lightsabers, and I was like, you realize I could just shoot you down, right? Like just shoot your ship that you're standing on and you're just floating forever. Like what happens now?
Yeah,
And that's what I thought was so silly. I was like, they were so focused on like trying to target her, and I'm like, just shoot the ship, like just
yeah,
blow up the ship. What are you doing?
yeah. I would love to see someone re-edit that scene with like the is it Foreigner where it's like and just like
The Led
I
Zeppelin.
come from the land of the sun. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
That'd be great. Or maybe just do one of those quick edits where it's like she stands up there and is looking like a badass, and then Sia just goes blows it up, and then it's like the credits like
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the end. Yeah, that's the end
yeah,
of the episode.
end of the show.
So I wrote down that was the most badass scene, but then we get the Purgles, which are these giant like gas whales that travel through space.
Demogorgon wheels.
Yes. And these are from Clone Wars. We see them a little bit in Clone Wars, and then we also see them in Rebels.
We did, right? Okay.
Mm.
So when I first saw them, I was like, oh, these are incredible. But in my head, I was like, these kind of look familiar. But I remember we talked about that when we were watching Clone Wars because they were
I
in
think
there,
we also saw them in Mando, one of the seasons in Mando, because I remember Grogu like
Really?
seeing them in space and being like, what, like kind of into
Were
them.
they the same thing, though? The same?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were like the
Wow.
silhouettes of the whales or something. I could be totally wrong on that, but for some reason I feel like I saw it there. But yeah, Anakin and Ahsoka, like they're traveling through like some type of cluster, and like the Purgles are in that cluster, and that's how they guide their way through it. But nothing has been as cool as like this scene we got, where they're like diving through the fins, going down the tails, and just such an awesome dogfight scene. Like, bravo! Like I literally was just like, dude, the last couple minutes of this episode were the coolest parts. Like I absolutely loved it.
I loved how Ahsoka's ship would like spin, but the center of it would just stay straight where they're at. And I'm like, that's interesting. It's like they're not really doing a barrel roll. They're just kind of sitting there, and like their ship's just going in circles.
Yeah, the other ships are like, I can't hit it, and it's just like, don't
Yeah.
aim for the wings, aim for the center. Just
But yeah, when they first mentioned that, when they were landed back on that planet, and they woke up Huyang, and he was talking about the Purgles, and they're like, oh, those are what we just saw, and he's like, when? Because he was out. But yeah, when Sabine was like, I haven't seen those since when Ezra disappeared, I was like, ooh, like I was like, dang, okay. And it was just another one of those things where I was like, yeah, I thought they were super cool looking, but it probably would have been more impactful had I seen Rebels and being like, oh, that was the last time,
Yeah, there's a episode in Rebels where like Ezra can actually communicate with them through the Force, and he's like riding on the back of them. Dude, it's super dope. Yeah, like
what?
Yeah, Rebels is really growing on me. The first season of Rebels I really struggled with, but like season 2 and going into season 3 right now, the show is fucking badass. Like I didn't think Clone Wars could be outperformed. Like nothing will beat the final season of Clone Wars, but like Rebels is up there, man. I'm like, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I need to start watching Clone Wars again so I can get to Rebels, because
Mm-hmm.
I was really enjoying Clone Wars when we were watching it. So I need to get back there. But overall, man, what would you give a ranking of this episode so far?
I'm gonna be high. I'm gonna be very
Yeah?
high. I think I'm in the
Okay.
9s. I think I'm like a 9.2,
Ooh.
and it was more of just like, because this is what I've been wanting. Like I've been wanting the show to be centering around Ahsoka, and like we got a lot of Ahsoka this week. We dove into like the Force, but then like that spacesuit scene legit was the coolest part of the episode for me. And I was just like, it just kept going up from there, and then it peaked, and then it was like credits, and I'm like, now I gotta wait 7 days for another episode. And that's where I want to be with this, because if I'm binging it at home, I would 100% jumped into episode 4, like no doubt. What about you?
They did a real good job with the 37 minutes that they had. When I first saw it was 37 minutes, I was like, man, they're doing this again, where it's like they start off real strong with like longer episodes and they kind of cut it down in the middle of the season. I'm gonna say a 9, dude. Like,
Okay.
there, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot that I didn't like, and the little subtle things that I appreciate, like with whatever that suit or CGI of that alien character, finding out that they did spatial audio for Ahsoka in that training scene. I loved the training scene. Like, I really just loved a lot about the episode, and I really didn't have a lot of negative things to say about it, other than the poo 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 poo. Like, I just did not like the ships. I love the way they looked. 10 out of 10 on the way they looked, but 2 out of 10 on the way they sound.
Well, and then like the final scene, right? Balin's there with all his minions at the woods, and he's like, the Jedis are hiding in the forest. Go find them. And I legit thought he was going to say, "Let's burn the forest down." And like I thought, because like that felt like that would have been such a villain thing to do. That
That's
like
true.
we're gonna burn this forest down. But I'm just like, oh god, the next episode we're just gonna get them being hunted, and they
He has
can't
such a
communicate. Oh, go ahead.
presence. Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say he has such a presence about him that's so like, I don't want to say evil because it almost doesn't seem super evil. It just seems commanding.
It's menacing. Like
Okay, that's
he's
a good word. Menacing.
like
Yeah.
I think he's right up there with like Maul, where it's just
Okay.
like this guy, you don't know a lot about him. There's a lot of mystery around him,
Mm-hmm.
and I assume we're gonna get an episode dedicated to him. Like I feel
Probably.
like that'd be a no brainer because he is a former Jedi. What happens next? And obviously, the next episode we'll have to figure out how Ahsoka and Sabine contact the Rebel fleet, but Rebel fleet's not going to be able to do much because of whatever that dude's name is, who's clearly a spy.
Ziono.
Ziono. Yeah, that's definitely a spy name. Like,
that is the most spy name I've ever heard in my life.
yeah.
What how many episodes did you say there were in this? Is it 8 episodes?
I think there's
for
8.
Ahsoka?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're almost halfway done already. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, and I'm excited for next week. And obviously, we want to hear what you guys thought about the episode as well. So please, in the comments or on social media, make sure to hit us up and let us know what you thought about them. And until next time, I think that's a pretty good place to leave it. Anything else you have?
No, I'm good, man. Again excited to see what's to come, and like you said, comment down below. Let us know what you rank this episode out of 10. If it was one of your favorites, let us know how impactful those whales were to you.
Exactly.